This is my first time. I am a avid listener of podcasts, though, so it's very exciting. I have worked with microphones before, though, because I do a lot of music in my life, and so I am used to all the things that come with that and the sound checks and the technical difficulties. Um,
So
and
you've been on stage before.
yeah, weirdly, it's where I feel the most comfortable. And that's kind of an odd thing to say considering when you're on stage, you're usually in front of a bunch of people.
It was still winter and it was already nighttime when we finished recording. I drove up Hannah's super steep street onto the 116 heading toward the mountains. When I finally reached the dirt roads up to Zeno Mountain Farm where I was staying, they were so icy that my car slid backward. I couldn't see a thing, my wheels were spinning, and my car did a full 360, so I let myself slide back, hoping not to end up in a ditch, and somehow managed to drive back to Hannah's. There, I was invited to have dinner with her whole family. We had leek soup, my favorite, and they offered me a bed in the living room. The family dog decided to tuck in with me, and that story, my friends, is a core memory of my trip. My name is Léa Hirschfeld, and this is episode 2 of Out of Sync, recorded with Hannah, whom I first met when she was 9 at Zeno Mountain Farm. Zeno is a place where people with and without disabilities live and create together, and it's been a foundation in Hannah's life as well as in mine. She was 17 when we recorded this episode and talked about growing up with cerebral palsy, the everyday realities of living with a disability, from performing on a stage to planning for college, and what it means to be seen as a full, complex person, not just defined by mobility aids or accommodations. She's 20 now, and she still sometimes feels out of sync, but who doesn't? The full transcript of this episode is on our YouTube channel. Hannah's twin Isabelle with our previous episode, and their mother Krista is up next. French stories are on Decadit, and now it's time to grab a cup of your favorite drink and enjoy the story.
I love it so much, and I've basically grown up like doing community theater, and the auditions, like auditioning for a role or a show, is always the hardest part because it feels like a really public like evaluation of you as a person, and you want to show your best. And sometimes I've had auditions that go horribly wrong. Then I'm like in my head, it's like, oh God, that was horrible, and then it wasn't actually horrible, but it feels like it went horribly. But then the actual process of doing shows and seeing something be created with the help of a lot of people is really nice and interesting, and I like the fact that you can be a completely different person and put on a costume, tell a different story, and invite people to hear that story and experience that story with you. It's a very human thing. I'm very at home talking about my experiences or talking to people in public.
What do you hope people see of you when you audition?
That's a good question. I hope that people see that I'm a talented performer and I have different sides to me. I hope that people see my disability and my things that I use, my mobility aids, as like a part of me, but not the whole story. And I hope that people see how much I love it, because I really, really do. When you actually do a show, like, for an audience, it's all out there for everyone to see, and can't necessarily be edited or changed. I always feel an energy shift.
So there's a certain rawness
Yeah,
to the stage.
yeah. It's real. For me, it was always special because my walker felt more like a tool than, something that was so big about me. When I'm on stage, it always feels like, oh, this is a part of my character, and like everybody, I'm just a part of telling this story. and it allowed me to have a lot of freedoms. In my real life, I worked very hard to get to the place of like self-esteem, self-love that I'm at, and that's great. But in theater, it comes a little bit more naturally because I'm a character.
Do you feel like when you're on the stage, you can come as you are and you don't have to justify anything?
Yeah, I think we as humans and we as disabled people justify a lot and have to explain ourselves and be like, this is why things are the way they are. What I'll add on to the request is like, because I can't, or because it's harder for me to blah blah, like it's harder for me to put on my coat when I'm sitting in my wheelchair. Sometimes it feels self explanatory, but also sometimes it feels like it needs to be explained because most people who help me aren't living my personal experience and wouldn't know that. I wish we had a little more freedom as a society to be like that in the sense that like yeah, this is just what we do, how we move, the way that we need support, or this is just the sort of like equipment that I use, and it becomes sort of like a fact rather than a question.
Do you feel like you've had the support or things put in place the way you need it at school, for example?
That is a very layered question in the sense that I've had some really good experiences in the school system, and I've had some not so great experiences.
If we started from a young age, for example, if you want to.
Yeah, when I was 5 years old, and I went to my local elementary school, before that, my parents would help me with really anything that I needed during the day. I've gotten more independent as I've gotten older, but they would help me get dressed in the morning. They would help me make breakfast. They would help me go to the bathroom. They would help me with whatever I needed during the day. And so when I went off to school, my parents told me that, okay, it was time for me to start asking my teachers or start asking different adults that were in the classroom, like when I needed help and how to help me. Um, and as a 5 year old with limited social experience and experience talking to adults, it was very daunting for someone to be like, okay, you need to be really frank with people that, like, this is my needs and this is how I want them done. But if I had not had that experience, I would not have become A, as comfortable as I am talking about disability, and B, as comfortable as I am just like during the day going up to somebody I either know or like sometimes it's somebody I'm not super familiar with, but I need help in the moment, and I'll just be like, hey, can you grab this door for me? Or like, can you hold this door open? Or can you zip my backpack? Or something like that. And, for a lot of teenagers, walking up to somebody you're not necessarily friends with and being like, hey, can you do this for me? Not many people love to do it outside of their circle, but having the experience that I do, and it's usually little things because I've gotten more independent, like I can, go to the bathroom on my own and go to from class to class on my own and get myself dressed in the morning and all this stuff, but there's still things that I need help with that I know I'm gonna need help with or that I don't anticipate that I need help with. So I always sort of have to be okay with the asking of something that's pretty vulnerable. I think disabilities and people with disabilities are kind of the blueprint for that because we really have no other choice of like, when we need help, we need help. If I can't open a door, I'm stuck essentially for however many minutes it takes for somebody else to come down the hall. As much as I would love it, like, I'm not gonna go through my life with everything being super accessible and non-faulty all the time. Cause like, even if there are automatic door buttons on a door, sometimes they don't work. I'm hoping to go to colleges or a college that is physically accessible. It's not gonna be perfect all the time, and and I would love to do things on my own and not be stranded, but sometimes that is how it is.
You talked about being embarrassed earlier. Do you know when that changed for you?
If I'm being honest, truly it changed in the summer of 2021 when I did this sort of leadership program with other girls with disabilities from all over the US. It was like a year-long program, so it started in the summer of 2021, and before that we had all applied. We met for a week in the Adirondacks, which is a mountain range in like rural New York, and we camped for a week, braved the weather. It was a very wet 4 days. It rained so much. And so it was me and 8 other girls with disabilities, 9 or 10 women with disabilities who were helping us and who were mentors. I think it really changed for me because we all had some sort of disability, autism. A bunch of us used wheelchairs, but then I met a woman who was blind. I met a woman who had a prosthetic leg, and we all were helping each other. And for me to see disabled person to disabled person helping each other was a really, really, really unique experience because you're figuring it out. Like, women in wheelchairs the same as mine were able to help me with things that previously only other able-bodied people helped me with. Like getting tucked into bed, make a fire in the morning, or picking stuff up from the ground if it fell. Just being so unafraid and unapologetic to be like, yo, I need a hand. Talking so candidly about their experiences with wheelchairs, with equipment, with people was so cool because it allowed me to be like, yeah, everybody asks for help. Everybody needs to get better about asking for help. And then, so that was like the first part of the program was staying for a week in the Adirondacks outdoors. And some of the girls had never camped before, which was so cool to see them like experience that. Because I have grown up in Vermont and have camped a lot. And then the other part of the program was after that trip, we all went home, got matched with another woman with a disability who was there, and we would meet remotely, like on Zoom, every month. And all of us girls created like year-long projects based around disability and disaster preparedness. So like my project was based around making sure that people with service animals are allowed to have them in emergency shelters that government organizations will set up during a flood or an earthquake or some sort of other disaster.
Because currently they're not allowed to?
Because currently there's, within American law, there is, like, you're allowed to have your service dog in existing buildings and places, but when you make a shelter on the fly and everybody who needs assistance comes there, some of the concerns were, like, if people were allergic or not comfortable with dogs or something like that. There's like a lot of education around how important service dogs are to people. So my project was based around that, and I did a lot of research, and then I talked to people from like the Vermont Center for Independent Living, which helps a lot of people with disabilities, and I found out that they, in conjunction with other like organizations, had made this guide for people with disabilities during an emergency, but their guide didn't feature a page about service animals, so I put a page in that guide, and it had all sorts of information on it, like what does your service dog do for you? A checklist of like all of the supplies that you have for your dog. And another girl decided to focus on like school shooter situations and disability and ended up doing a whole research paper. She just noticed that there was a real lack of resources slash communication between people with disabilities or people who are on individualized education plans and like what they should do during a school shooting, which unfortunately in America happens a lot.
So to have an adapted protocol.
Yeah, disabled people are a lot more vulnerable. We can't all move as fast. It might take us longer to get somewhere safe, or someone who might have sensory issues and big alarms might be hard for them to hear, or the sensory part of their brain would sort of get overloaded. And so I think it's really cool that it's out there now because it needed to be said and it needed to be explored. And then the cool thing was after we all finished our projects this last summer, so the summer of 2022, we met up in August in Washington, D.C. for 4 or 5 days, and we did touristy stuff. Like we looked at buildings and we went to the Capitol and we walked around, but we also did a presentation night where we each presented our projects. Stephanie, who's the director and founder of Empower Network, invited. So like people, there was a woman from FEMA there, which is the Federal Emergency Management Association. They're people who deal with response to different disasters. There was people from the National Council of Independent Living who are in charge of all the independent living centers around the country, which is really cool because they do a ton of work for disabled people. There were just people who work in government and are doing work on the disability policy side of things. There were people who were activists and speakers, and we got to talk to a lot of them after, and it was really, really interesting because not all of them were disabled, but they all had like different ties to that sort of work. So it was really cool having conversations with them. And so I think seeing all of that and going through that program and just that really solidified for me, like not, or to be less embarrassed about asking for help. It really is like a normal human thing, and codependency is great, and being dependent on other people isn't a bad thing. That was a very long-winded answer, but that was definitely a pivotal moment for me because it was people with disabilities helping other people with disabilities, and like I hadn't really ever seen that, and that was just the norm.
Why do you think society is so reluctant when it comes to vulnerability?
I think that we as people are afraid to be seen as weak because we have a mental image of ourselves. And when that mental image of us being strong and capable and able to do all the things is different, it's really hard for people to accept that. Also, I think there's just a general feeling in society that people who require more help in whatever way that manifests, so like not just physical help, but like any sort of help, because obviously there are many, many disabilities in the world. I think those people are regarded as, oh, they're asking for so much, or they're a burden on other people because people with disabilities require so much help. And I think nobody wants to be that or feel like that, even though that is not a true statement of what it is. It's just people asking for what they need. That's what people go to, and no one wants to have to feel like that. And so I think people are reluctant to ask for help because they don't want to seem like they're dumping all their problems onto somebody, or that they're a burden for somebody else. We think we're very self-reliant, and that's a good thing, but everybody needs something or somebody. Like, you can't do everything on your own. And I think sometimes people are so determined to do things on their own when they can't, it's really hard for them to like accept that you can't do everything on your own.
Do you think there could be a link with the general idea of profitability in society? You know, like what people can give is often analyzed through their economical value, you know, and how much we cost to society, but literally financially,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
how much we can give back.
yeah. Especially in the US, there's just such a overwhelming capitalist mindset of profit, 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 and squeeze your resources dry. Because we need to be able to sustain ourselves, and there's a reason we're the most economically prosperous and powerful countries, and we need to stay that way. And sometimes that's great. Sometimes it's yes, some things are doing so much good, but also it allows for a narrow viewpoint of what good is this person to me if they can't give me anything in return or require more of me than what I require to them, something like that. The sad thing is that a lot of people's quote unquote worth is measured by, if I do this for you, will you give me back the same amount of what I just gave to you? Um,
And the question is, how do we quantify?
yeah. And it's if I gave you a chocolate bar and say I had been working really hard to make that chocolate bar, so then of course I would ask for I don't know, $5. But you can't quantify everything, and some things are just things of human nature and things that like I need help in order to survive. Like that. That's the barest words I can put it in. Is I need other human help in order to live my life. And I think that people are so obsessed with money and profit and how much good is this person going to do for me, rather than, okay, let's just look at this person for who they are. And economically speaking, disabled people are expensive. We have PCA services which are paid for in large part by the government or different companies that assist you financially with paying for those services for people who use mobility devices like I do. Your insurance company pays for all that. As a population, we need a lot, which I think is one of the maybe reasons why people are oh, because you need so much, you're then taking something away from me. And there's that weird no, you can't take this away from me, even if you really, really need it, or are gonna be better off from it. It's everything needs to be quote unquote equal in people's minds, which I think it's putting on my activist hat here. People are so threatened when black and brown people and other minorities are hey, our lives have value, and then the majority people are and ours don't? Is that what you're saying? Are you that's what you're saying, right? And people are no, we're just saying that historically we have not been treated with the same respect and we deserve to be. And I think people get so defensive because we all have this mindset of what's mine is mine, and if anything comes in danger of that, I have nothing, you know?
People care too much about their individuality.
Yeah. Our society is so intrigued by people's accolades or how much money they have or what they've done, and it's what resources and opportunities are they subconsciously taking away from other people while doing that? And it's everyone wants the thing that makes them them. And if they think that that part of them is going to be taken away, then they get really defensive. I just think it's really interesting.
What do you want to study?
Cool. I want to hopefully go to a school, a university that has a disability studies program. as a minor because in that program I could learn a lot about history around disability and like societal things around disability and just learn a lot about that part of my identity because I want to do advocacy work specifically in the arts and theater field, like just talking to producers and directors and choreographers and set designers and stage managers and people who build theaters and anyone in between about, hey, I've been doing theater for a long time and I see a gap of disabled performers in your industry. And like, here's what I think you could do to be better about that. Here's some things to consider when you audition people. And here's some things to consider when you cast for a certain role. And here's some things to consider when you choreograph a show and stuff like that. And I want to just help more people with disabilities get on bigger stages in theater because I don't see a lot of myself represented in theater right now, and it's one of the things I love most. And there's lots of ways that I could get to where I want to be, which, as a person who likes to plan things, is both exciting and terrifying for me.
As a person who's 11 years older than you, it's good that you don't really know. Oh, you're going to discover so much along the way. You're 17 now, right?
Yes, I am.
How are you going to choose your university?
Wow, that's a really good question, a really relevant question because I'm 17 and I'm a junior in high school. Usually this is the time where you start talking a lot about college. Physical accessibility, like I said, is my top priority. Also, college in the US is freaking expensive. If I'm gonna pay to go to school somewhere for 4 years, like I'm gonna get the bang for my buck. Thankfully, on the internet, if you do like a search, like there's all these lists for like top 10 best colleges for people with physical disabilities. There's articles from people who are actual students on college campuses who like rank different things about their campuses. And so that is a really big factor in where I'm gonna go and where I'm gonna apply even. There is the option of like just go somewhere and you'll figure it out. They have to figure it out when you get there. But I would rather go somewhere where things are already in place so it's easier and I have more peace of mind. Because I think about a lot of these things even as a high schooler in my marginally accessible high school. So I would like to go somewhere where things are more like already there. Like there's a school that I'm going to go visit in Florida, which I have family there, which is great. But then there's other schools out in the Midwest region, so like Illinois, Ohio, Arizona, that I don't have any family. So like if I did decide to go there, like different factors of where I go will be weighed more than others. My parents are very much like, we want you to go somewhere where you can thrive, and so if that means being further, like, that's okay, but, you know, we would like you to be near some family if possible, so I'm hoping that it works out that way. Getting into college is hard. I'm hoping to go see as many of the schools that I'm thinking about as possible.
Do you have siblings?
Yes, I have a twin named Isabelle, and I have a brother named Sam. And my twin and I are really close. We shared bunk beds for like the first 11 years of our lives, so it'll be quite an adventure when we go off to school. They are my biggest cheerleader, and like they're very good at listening. I think we are that for each other. The nice thing about having a twin is like you go through the same like stages of life at the same time, so you'll like, sort of have a buddy. At any given moment, I can be like, oh, they're not that far away from me in this building right now, like, and we go through the same sort of emotional things sometimes, and we're going through the same processes, and so it will really be an adjustment when we go off to school. And then for my brother, me and Isabel and him are exactly 4 years apart. So when he graduates high school, will be the same year that we graduate college. which is a pretty wild thing to think about. Um, but I'm very lucky in the sibling department. They're both really great human beings, and I think they have a really adult view on disability. They're just like very empathetic people. I feel like if things hadn't worked out the way that they did, like maybe they wouldn't be as empathetic or apt to understand people. And so I think it's a really beautiful thing. Not to say that I'm taking the credit for it, but I don't know. I've just heard them. I've heard my twin and my brother talk about disability, and they notice things that are considered ableism, and they notice when people say hurtful things and they understand why it's hurtful, and they just have like a very large view of people and disabled people and marginalized people. And
What's ableism?
ableism is a form of discrimination towards disabled people, or the belief that non-disabled people are superior. Ableism can be a building not being accessible. Ableism can be, oh my gosh, you're so inspirational. I could never do what you do, which is something that many people have said to me, and a lot of people think of it as a compliment.
Why is it not?
It is well-meaning, but I am a normal human being living my life just like the rest of the other 7 billion people on the planet, and what am I doing that's so different from what you're doing? Sure, I move a little differently or I go through the world in a different way, but I'm just trying to take life day by day. So when people act like I've done this courageous thing by like being out in the world, it's like people put people with disabilities on pedestals of like, oh my gosh, look at them. They have this like enormous challenge in their life and they're doing amazing. So like I can do that too because I'm fortunate enough not to be disabled. And I think that can be really harmful rhetoric because it perpetuates the idea that disabled people are miserable and or to be pitied and or their lives are, sad,
Or that it's a bad thing.
or that it's a bad thing,
Negative.
which is not.
Mm.
Everybody has different levels of comfort with their relationship to their disability, and everyone has different levels of comfort with the words that they use to describe themselves, and disability is such a large umbrella, and each person's experience is valid and good and deserves to be listened to.
Your disability occurred at birth?
Yes, my disability is, I'm gonna get scientific here, spastic cerebral palsy, which is actually a fairly common type of disability. It is one that always occurs at birth, and for me, it most impacts my waist down, but also some in my hands and my fingers and my arms. And it can range from pretty mild to more. It evolves with people, and I try to avoid using negative words to describe disability because that's not the portrait I want to paint. And I learned that from a lot of wise disabled people who I've had conversations with. So we just evolve with our disabilities. But yeah, I was born 27 weeks premature, which makes you more susceptible for different things like diseases and other things. So they kept a close eye on us anyway, but I wasn't like officially diagnosed until I was about like a year old. Growing up, my parents were very candid about like explaining to me what my situation was, and they used different words than they use now. It was never like a sugar-coated thing. They didn't want to shelter me from anything. Well, they did in a sense, but they also didn't want me not knowing a part of my identity. And so they explained it to me and they explained it to my siblings. But growing up, I think we were treated a little bit differently. And Isabel, they had an understanding of that from an early age like I did. I think it is really interesting to have a sibling with a disability that you're so close with, because when my parents aren't around or it's just me and them in a situation with our friends, like Isabelle is the person who helps me. It's a lot for someone to do. Not to say that it's a bad thing, but it's definitely like another layer of responsibility to put on someone and an expectation to put on someone, and I'm very grateful for them and for their easiness doing it and general nonchalance about it. And also very grateful to have a group of friends who are ready and willing to help me in different situations. Like once last summer, we all went down to the river and we went through a friend's backyard, and it was very woody and had like sticks and rocks and mud all down the path. So not the most accessible thing. And so we went down, and then we were trying to get back. And we were like, okay, this is probably not gonna work with my walker. Like, what's our plan B? And my friend AJ was just like, you want me to carry you bridal style? And I was like, sure. It was such a natural thing, and so I'm very grateful. But I definitely do think that being a sibling, like, if there's not other people in, like, your immediate vicinity, like, obviously you are gonna help that person, but it's definitely, like, a weird expectation to put on someone, and sometimes a hard one, and I think we both feel a little bit bad about it sometimes in our own right, and we talk about that a lot. I think that's a very natural part of a relationship is like, yeah, you're helping me, and also I help you in a different way.
We met at a place called Zeno Mountain Farm. How long have you been going there for?
Yeah, I live about 15 minutes down the road from Zeno, which I am incredibly lucky. Because of that, and in part because of one of the co-directors being my occupational therapist when I was younger, I've been going since I was about 7 or 8 years old. I have always been one of the youngest people at Zeno, and I am really, really lucky to have that experience so young because it was one of the first times that I was exposed to other people who had my shared experience or could relate to my shared experience in a way.
What is Zeno?
Zeno is a organization, a nonprofit, a community of people with and without disabilities who hang out together. Zeno is a place that is full of the most pure love that I've ever experienced in my life. Just like radical acceptance of a person and just being like, yeah, we'll take you as you are, all of your bumps and edges and humanness. Every time someone new comes to Zeno, they introduce themselves, and we usually ask them to tell a poop story, which is the most like childish thing ever, and I love it so much because of usually it's like, oh, tell this like amazingly heartfelt story about like how you got to Zeno, and then it's just like poop story. It's so funny, and it's like a way for people, especially I think people who are new, like you definitely have a lot of nerves because with you don't always know what you're walking into, and you like I think some people are, afraid of saying like the wrong thing or doing the wrong thing or like so I think it really helps break the ice, like ridiculous things happen and it's all just like part of it. And I think that people don't expect for a place like Zeno to be so like loose in the sense that like last summer we brought like 20 or 30 people down to this part of the river in Winooski, and we all floated down in this big line of blow up floats. It was kind of hard to get down to, like it was pretty steep, but everybody like was supporting each other and figured out ways to get every single person down there. And then when we got out of the river, we used Emily and Paco, two people at Zeno. They had climbing gear, and they rigged up their climbing gear onto the slope to like get back up, and we all used the climbing gear to get back up. And it's like, yeah, we did that. Like we figured out a way to do it, and it worked, and people had so much fun. And so many people have like never done that before, and we're like, it was awesome. An ordinary person would think about like the people that go to Xena and they're like immediately like, oh, isn't that like really unsafe, like, and one of the co-directors has said that always has stuck with me is like safety third, which I kind of love because obviously we care about people's safety and well-being, but also we allow ourselves take risks. Like there is like planning that goes into things and stuff, but you would think that with like a group of people with disabilities, everyone thinks that people need to be so sheltered and protected, and obviously that's true, but also like to me like safety third means we're allowing ourselves to live. We want to have fulfilled lives, and like life isn't always perfectly measured out. So I just like the fact that we challenge the norms of, oh God, you can never do anything like remotely unpredictable because something might go wrong. And it's like if you spend so much time worrying about what might go wrong, you won't be there when something like cool happens and it goes right. We lean on each other for different things, and one of my friends, her name's Emily Sundstrom, she said to the person I was paired with, like, oh yeah, Hannah could be emotional support for someone and be amazing at it. And that was like such a cool compliment to get because usually I'm the one being supported or looked after or whatever. And for someone to be like, oh, you could be a person looking after somebody else, like that's so cool to me. Like everyone has something different to contribute at, and everyone, I guess, just like has value and has something to say, and like it's made me more patient. No one mode of communication is more valuable than another. The beauty of being able to relate to each other, sit around a table and have a meal and talk about everything, but also be able to say, I had this really specific experience and it sucked, and have a person next to you be like, oh yeah, and then tell a story that's like very similar to yours and be like, I totally understand how that feels. You don't get a lot of spaces like that, open and loving. And I wish everybody in the world had a Zeno because the world would be a much kinder place. Like I read a story about this camp called Experience Camp for kids who had lost a loved one or a family member. And they went to camp for a week and they also got a space to talk about grief and what it means for them and share their personal stories. See that like everybody grieves in a different way and no one way is wrong or good or bad. So it's nice to see that there are like different places that are like similar to Zeno, and then being able to walk into a room and have friendships with people who can say, yeah, I completely get that.
Do you have a final word?
Even if we can't all relate to each other's experiences, like we can all relate to being overlooked sometimes or like not valued or whatever it is. So like understand that all marginalized groups like deserve spotlights and love and attention and are doing really cool things. So yeah, I want to just say like thank you for listening, and I hope that more awareness gets spread and that more people know about disability so that we can all work together towards equality and access, because we can't do it by ourselves and we can all help each other. So yeah, that's my final words.
Thank you so much, Hannah.
Yes, thank you for having me. It was so fun. I feel really cool being on my first official pond.
You've been listening to Out of Sync, exploring life through disability one story at a time. New episodes drop every Tuesday. Transcripts are available on YouTube, and French language stories on Décalé, Decales. I'm Léa Hirschfeld. Thanks for listening.